The Starfield situation is somehow getting even worse. So we already had the Chat GPT responses to negative Steam reviews, and now we're getting the design director behind the game, Emil saying that critics should essentially not talk about the game in certain ways because they don't know how the game is made, so that discredits them from being able to criticize it. And his long 15-tweet thread is, generally speaking, a huge mess, and it's very difficult to talk around, and this is my third attempt at making a video on it because I felt like the first 2 times it came off particularly aggressive, and that's not the energy that I want to put out into the world using my channel. But I did feel slightly personally attacked. Emil is talking about different critics who say that they know how the game is made, how the sausage is made, and that people shouldn't talk about the game in those regards if they don't know how the sausage is made, and that generally a lot of the criticism is disrespectful to the amount of work put in by the team. And I have so many issues with this idea, and I want to put out my thoughts. I really didn't know if I was going to make a video on this or not, but it bothers me, and I take it as a challenge to talk about it without getting too aggressive. So first off, Emil Pagliarulo is an incredible person, right? He worked on Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76. He was a lead designer and writer on those games, and he is the design director and lead writer for the main story on Starfield. Now, the basis of what Emil is talking about is how disconnected players are from the realities of game development, but they speak with complete authority. He says he can guess what it takes to make a Hostess Twinkie, but he doesn't work in the factory, so what the hell do I really know? Not a lot. And he kind of cries about it, but trying to say that what there should be in the games industry is positivity and enjoying good games, and that people are not really giving credit where it's due because the team worked really, really hard on the game, and it's not their fault if things come out bad, things like that. And it really feels like crying. At the end, somebody answers him by saying that they feel the most reasonable people who are criticizing Starfield understand that concessions had to be made. These people aren't simply saying the game needed to be better, they're saying that Bethesda should have designed Starfield differently in order to make it better. To which he says, that's absolutely fair. I was referring to the unreasonable people, which is like a very easy excuse of just like, I want to say that all of y'all are dumb. Except some who are logical, but we're never going to address that very well constructed logical criticism that has been lodged at us. We're never going to do that. We're just going to have the Chat GPT responses on the Steam reviews and complain about how we're getting criticized so much. And it's overall, to me, a huge shit show. So I am one of those critics of Starfield, and my video on Starfield is definitely not the largest video on it at all. I mean, Nakey Jakey recently came out with his Starfield video. Patrician TV, who at this point has cemented himself as the absolute expert on everything related to Bethesda games. He's done 8-hour analysis or longer on most Bethesda games, and he keeps covering them. He has so much knowledge. He's read so many interviews, he's watched so many developer interviews, he knows his stuff inside and out. And I feel like people are being criticized in this first post where he says that you shouldn't criticize if you don't know how the sausage is made. He's completely attacking everybody who puts in a lot of work and understanding and care into their criticisms of Starfield, even if later on he's like, I was referring to the unreasonable people, smiley face. That's just a cop-out. He is undoubtedly, in my mind, attacking people like me, which I'm very proud of my Starfield review. I think that I was very fair to the game. I honestly expressed my opinions and even mentioned a lot of positives for the game that are very personal to me, things that I think are good in the game. And all of my criticisms about its design are very logically founded and take into account the difficulties of development and a lot of knowledge accumulated over the years of the creation engine and the limitations that it has. And it just feels like his entire thread is very poorly constructed. So he goes on to say things like he understands why people complain, because when you're a consumer and you spend money on things, you think that gives you the right to complain about those things. And he defends himself. I spend a lot of money on games every year, but I don't complain. I don't complain because I respect my fellow devs, which comes to kind of say that people who criticize games don't respect the devs. And then he follows up a lot of that stuff with a lot of obvious things, like, the truth is nobody sets out to make a bad game. We know that, Emil, and that is precisely what I champion on my channel, is that I want games to be better, and they can't really be better unless somebody gives detailed criticism that is functional about those games. But apparently my opinion can be invalidated by you just saying, well, you've never worked at a AAA studio, so how would you know? It just ends up coming off as we don't like the criticism, and I'm unhappy that people have opinions. Even when a lot of those opinions are very well constructed opinions that aim to help the game. Not to mention that as design director on Starfield, Emil is directly responsible for a lot of the bad in the game. As I said in my analysis, in my breakdown of Starfield, a lot of its biggest problems come from the concept of what Starfield is. And I have a video that I've been working on for the last week talking about how that design is so rotten, how it harms the game so much, and it's just a very misguided pursuit. Which, no matter what Emil wants, I'm still going to put out that video because it's not even a criticism of Starfield. It's more just thinking about concepts in games. But it just feels so unprofessional to come out here crying like this. So a lot of those design decisions, like the fact that it's a spacefaring open world game that needed to have a full galaxy of planets, lead to things like the fact that exploration, which is something that people really want in a Bethesda game, is not there anymore, and it gets rid of a lot of the things that we want from an open world by the nature of how its open world is, and that's just a design decision that is really bad. And I'm sure, and I've said it before, that the intention was always different. But in the end, if during development it turns out that the tools that were available and the man hours or just the ability of the studio to execute that vision wasn't possible, you should have changed the direction of the game instead of putting out a game that does so many things poorly. So many of the things that you've done before very well, very poorly. And that's without mentioning how the game doesn't innovate or advance anything about the main gameplay systems of a Bethesda-style game at all. It's just the same game we've had before, but worse. And all of the things that it does worse come from decisions in design, in forcing that galaxy-sized map, enforcing the open world exploration, the procedural generation, the lack of content, the lack of exploration, the lack of meaningful encounters, the lack of level scaling and surprises. Just the emptiness of the game doesn't happen because of technical limitations. It happens because you decided to make this game way bigger than what it's ever capable of being, and this game could have just been one solar system and been a much better game. This game could have focused on the strengths of Bethesda, even if it compromised the original vision of a full immersive galaxy, to end up with a better game. Starfield to me is a clear case of a game that doesn't have its priorities straight in what it wanted to do and ended up being subpar in the things that it should have been good at for fans, for consumers to be happy with it. And I feel completely in my right to criticize that, even if I've never worked at a AAA studio. And the fact that Emil thinks that I shouldn't have that opinion really gets under my skin. Of course, you can't come out, Emil, and say what really happened in the background. What was the original intention and what went wrong with the game to be criticized as it is, because it does deserve a lot of its criticism. You can't say that because it would be admitting that anything went wrong instead of staying with this narrative that Chat GPT really wants to hold up, that Starfield is amazing and players just don't understand it. But it really breaks my heart to continue seeing so much of Bethesda turn into whatever this mess is, this crying little baby in a corner saying, you're being unfair to us, you're not understanding it, you're not being reasonable, and using these very manipulative words around it to say all of that. And while I am not an authority on Bethesda and the creation engine, I have an understanding of it. I feel this sort of thing is also very disrespectful to the insane amount of work that people put into their criticisms of these games that they care for and love, things like Patrician TV. Because I'm sure that for as much as there have been a lot of videos made on Starfield, this isn't a coincidence that this is happening right after Nakey Jakeys and Patrician TVs, which are two of the larger ones. I'm pretty sure either those videos got to him or a lot of the opinions that people are now saying because of those videos have gotten to him. And I think that the philosophy here should be to learn from the criticisms or to address them, not to sweep them under the rug and say, you shouldn't talk about it. Anyways, I have an actually very good video that, like I said, I've spent a whole week learning to edit in ways that I want to do, talking about realism in games and using Starfield as its example. So stay tuned for that, and remember to subscribe if you're new, and remember to like the video if you think more people should hear this. I've been Mugthief, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.